I was on Raider Central, a YouTube channel run by Mikey Raider, a rambunctious Raider fan, if you know what I mean. And he brought up a lot of different subjects. Sometimes you have to pause the video to go search around. And that's where I'm at right now. I'm currently on Derek Carr's Instagram page. And Mikey Raider wonders about Derek Carr's post. And this is his latest post. Starts off with just wondering about Instagram. In it reiterates what Derek Carr's already said many times before. Derek Carr, quarterback. Because Derek Carr, God worshipper, doesn't fit. He's got 363 posts. It's probably not a whole lot for Instagram type people. So he picks and chooses what he has to say carefully. I'm sure his agent appreciates it. He's only got 598,000 followers. So he's not Donald Trump. Because I know how many Raider fans love Donald Trump. And he's only following, like most rock stars, most celebrities, a very small percentage, 122. He's probably following Jesus, Mark, Luke, you know. I don't have a cough button. Derek Carr, Christian, husband, father, and football player. And then he has his Twitter, which he has said he will block people if it offends him, blah, blah, blah. So as Mikey Raider points out, of Raider Central, he lists Christian first. We've already known that. You know me, guys. Remember that? That little phase he went through? You know me. Then husband. Puts his wife. Then father. I'm assuming husband and father are very close. Because his third picture is the sneakers that say the hospital, I believe, in Fresno. Or outside Fresno, I think he said. I'm not familiar with Fresno. Where his son had several surgeries when he was younger and saved his life. So he's very grateful for that. And he credits his Christian faith with husbandry, his wife by his side, and of course his son, or sons now. And lastly, he's a football player. Okay, that's all perfectly rational, and if you will. I mean, he came to the Raiders basically talking like he was like a 35-year-old. You know me, guys. And here is the post. It's got 77,500 loves, I guess. It's got 1,374 comments. And here it is. Derek Carr, quarterback, locked in, looking forward. 2018 tag. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up, and let us run with endurance the race of God has set before us. Hebrews 12:1. As Mikey Rada points out, I think it's observant of him. There's a lot of key words in there. And some people search for things by key words. I've done it myself. If I'm looking for some sort of quote, many people who make these sort of pitches, what do they call them, memes? I usually just call it a picture with some words on it. But that's me. Derek Carr. Now, what Ray DeCentral was sort of trying to intimate is that this is referring to, because the picture is right beside Marshawn Lynch, that the weight of sin is right beside him. The thing holding the Raiders back is right beside him. And ironically, it's Gruden put on the spot during the press conference and asked about Lynch, in saying he's relating to him and he likes guys like him who didn't come back necessarily for the money, even though Gruden's getting paid $100 million. I don't know how much of it's guaranteed, but he's getting paid $100 million, $10 million a year, plus whatever else he can scrape up. Guarantee there's more incentives to go to the Super Bowl and stuff like that. That Marshawn Lynch came back for the same reasons Gruden came back, a love of Oakland. Okay, a love of Oakland. Lynch is from Oakland, and I guess that's understandable. Gruden is not from Oakland, but he did coach the 49ers in San Francisco, and obviously he came over to the Raiders. But the weight is right beside him. Derek Carr went to a Christian high school. It is Christian. It is not Catholic. I want to make that distinction. Christian refers to Protestant. It's actually a little more looser than Catholic. Catholic is heavily oppressive. Trust me, I was raised a Catholic, and it is oppressive. Everything's a sin. It's Billy Joel's song. What's the song he got in trouble for? He's Jewish. Debatable whether he's a Hebrew. Highly debatable. But Derek Carr went to a Christian high school, and that's not to say that Protestants are out there, really very strict. And I don't want to use the word Orthodox Protestant. I don't think there's any such thing. But they're generally conservative people. They would be conservative people. They generally are. You will see them in certain parts of the country, and they will act a certain way, and will have certain manners. Sometimes Catholics, you'll see that in the Northeast, while they have a very strict upbringing, Northeast, a little more looser with the tongue, I think. I mean, in recent decades, I'm saying, really, that times have changed. It's not that, it's not the Crusades, Spanish Inquisition. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition. But you can see, you can go look at, some homages to like Catholics, especially Irish, really. They would rebel against these priests. And it's played up in movies. Just think like John Wayne's The Quiet Man. How they rouse the priests, whatever. Well, that movie's, it's pretty political correct, and they're helping out the Protestant, the vicar. It's a movie though, but still, there's plenty of history of like Catholics, whiskey on a Sunday. Irish Catholics, whiskey on a Sunday. It was a song made famous in the late 60s, 1968. If you were Irish, all through the late 60s, 70s, that was a song that was on the radio. It's about a guy who couldn't drink all week long, but had whiskey on a Sunday. And he hallucinated, and he came back from the dead. But anyway, Protestants tend to be conservative. And there's many different Protestant faiths or whatever, and people who call themselves Christian tend to be conservative. They tend to surround themselves by other conservatives, live in conservative communities, act a conservative life, are gentlemen and ladies. That's not to say other faiths aren't like that, but I think most people know what I mean. And so he went to a Christian high school, and he surrounded himself by other Christians. And I remember his first year, some of the other players were attending his Bible class. So he goes to Bible class. And now he has got this devil beside him. Marshawn Lynch is kind of a little bit of a devil. I don't know what his religion is, but it is probably a little different than Carr's. He is very outspoken, and he is very urban. That's going to offend a lot of people, but it's the truth. It is reality. Deal with it. Marshawn Lynch is urban. Now, I come from an area. Al Davis didn't stick around too long. Brockton, Massachusetts. He moved on to Crooklyn, New York after he was born here. Crooklyn, New York. That's where he gets that accent. Well, Brockton is a decidedly urban place. It used to be quite a bit different. If you go back to like the 50s and stuff like that, it was predominantly an Irish Catholic type of city. Where there was a large Italian population here as well. We had Rocky Marciano, great boxer. You can go over to a cemetery. I walk in a cemetery all the time. In the front of the cemetery is the oldest tombstones. And you could read them. They're all, even though it's a Catholic cemetery, they're all Irish names. In the beginning of the cemetery. In the back of the cemetery are these like Portuguese names, because the demographics has changed. Back in the, I don't know what decade it was. I don't know if it was the 60s or 70s. The local politicians started to accept federal money. And when they accepted federal money, they had to take on federal programs, like Section 8 type programs. And at the same time, cities like Boston were deciding a good idea to get rid of all of our troublemakers, our prostitutes, our homeless, troublemakers, loafers, vagabonds, whatever. They bust them and dropped them off in the middle of the night in Brockton. Back then, not everyone owned a car. Back then, public transport wasn't as good as today. There wasn't a commuter rail. I'm assuming there would have been buses, but even then, it was probably a toil or whatever. And if someone was just dumped off and they didn't have a home anyway back then, they weren't walking back. I've walked 20 miles in a day. It's a stretch. I walk 5 miles a day right now. That's a stretch for a lot of people. So even back then, you're not walking back. So Brockton started slowly to become decidedly urban. And there were these government type of areas called projects. These were welfare areas, welfare housing. And there were these Section 8 housing that just pops up everywhere. And the demographics in Brockton changed from the 70s to now, where actually white people are the minority now. They've just crossed the line. In 10 years, was it 1990, was 70, something like 70% white. Basically 70%, all the different white European ethnicities that came to Brockton for whatever reason. Irish, my grandmother came here, fleeing the blacks and tans, the British, during the original Troubles, or if you want to call it the first Troubles, after the Irish uprising, 1916, right before, with the Irish rebels, IRA blew up the post office, and the British employed black and tans, which were criminals, to go out and hunt Irish men. They were taking Irish men out of houses and shooting them. They were raping women. These were criminals that were set on the Irish people, and people fled. And my grandmother was one of them. She was sent to America to live with her aunt. And other European countries had problems all during the 19th century. Again, the Irish had the famine in the mid-19th century that sent a couple million Irish to America. But there were wars all over Europe during the 19th century. It was ridiculous. And many people came over from Germany and Lithuania and the World War II stuff, and just lots of people came over. You had the Italians coming over all during the 19th century and after World War II, during World War II. And this is where they settled. But it started to change. Believe it or not, Oakland, because I've looked it up. I can't find the page anymore. I looked up the demographics in Oakland when that stadium was created. Was it the late 60s, early 70s? Was completed, Oakland Alameda County Stadium. The demographics in Oakland were much different. You can go Google a concert that took place there in the early 70s. It was Leonard Skinner. Look at the audience. It's all white. Now, I'm not saying that's just all people who lived in Oakland. People would have traveled there. But the demographics were different. It was majority white. it was majority less taxes. There wasn't this huge welfare society. There wasn't this huge tax revenue. What the hell is tax revenue? It's just the most insane concept. And politicians use it to try to get votes. I just looked that up the other day about California. California, around that time, I think it was 1970, 71, only paid like $2 billion in taxes, or collected $2 billion, various taxes. But now they collect, what was it? I forget how many billions, hundreds of billions, but it was outrageous. Things have changed a lot. Demographics in Oakland changed. It used to be majority white, kind of like where I live right now, and now it is actually black. The black population from the early 70s to now has actually declined. It is mostly Mexican or Spanish, Hispanic. So demographics change, and with demographics you get different ideas. And Marshawn Lynch is urban, and he has an urban tongue. He speaks fluent Ebonics. Take offense to that all you want, but that's how he talks. I'm not saying I have the best grammar in the world, but I sort of sound like I know how to speak English. I'm just making this as a point. You can take offense all you want. It's not going to bother me one bit. I'm not afraid of offending people. I'm making a comparison between Derek Carr and Marshawn Lynch. They come from different perspectives. Derek Carr went to a Christian high school. Then he followed his brother to Fresno State. I guarantee he majored in Bible. You know, he's totally Bible. When people are Bible, they don't swear. My father never swore. Before he started watching cable television, I never heard him even utter a swear stronger than damn it. So, Marshawn Lynch, I guarantee, knows every swear in the book, every context of a swear, or taking regular words or making up words and making just a bad situation for someone who's not used to hearing that. And if you're not used to hearing that, and I remember going to CCD, I must have been maybe 11 years old, 12, probably like 12. I was not used to hearing swears. I mean, when kids are that 12, 13 age and they just start, it's an insecurity thing. They'll start swearing constantly. It's F this, F that, because they think they're acting tough or whatever, or it's a total insecurity thing, even though they're just words. If you're not used to hearing that, it's shocking. If you've never heard swearing, I mean, I know this is very hard to understand, where you just turn on the television right now and they pretty much let F-bombs out. They let all sorts of other things, or they'll allow the first syllable to be let out before they bleep it. You hear it all the time, and we're surrounded by media, and it's unavoidable now. You will become desensitized to any word. I personally believe religion created this word prison, if you will. The control of words is some sort of way to control the masses. I believe in religion. Organized religion is used to control the masses. Anyway, Derek Carr, I guarantee, going to a Christian high school, being insulated from people like Marshawn Lynch. He never heard these type of things. I was insulated at that, like, 11, 12 years old. All of a sudden I started hearing that, and it's just, whoa. You know, you're offered, like, to smoke a joint, and you're like, oh, I don't do that. Then you go to a junior high in the projects. Yeah, that's me. I was Carpenters. I was Brady Bunch. A lot of people aren't going to understand coming from a lily white sunbeam bread, even though that's poison, was poison, is poison, bleach bread. A lot of people are not going to understand that sort of background and how you could actually be so insulated or just unhip to whatever the urban community thinks is right. It was culture shock going to that junior high. Most of the, not most, but many of the students carried guns to school. It was in the projects. There were fights with chains and, you know, lead pipes, and the police were there often. And it was very urban. It was shocking to go from a high, we call it elementary school in a village. It's what's called a village, a Lithuanian village. It was an area of Brockton where people from Lithuania moved during the shoe days. Brockton was known for shoes. Believe it or not, there's not a statue to Al Davis here, but it was known as the shoe capital of the world during Civil War. 95% of all Union shoes, including the Confederate shoes that they ripped off dead Union soldiers, came from Brockton, Massachusetts. It was the shoe capital, and Lithuanians were definitely into the shoe business. And it was called the Village, and I don't know how many people were Lithuanian in my elementary school, but most of them, I'd say a great deal of them, were Irish. And I remember one day a teacher asked what our religion was, and a lot of people didn't even know their religion, and very few said they were Protestant, I remember, but most were like Catholic. They were Jewish. But you know something? There were no blacks. It was like 2 blacks, 3 blacks in the whole school. If you go to the Village right now, it's all these Portuguese mulattoes. They're half black, half Portuguese, and they are high criminal society, Catholic, but they're a bunch of gangbangers. That's who lives there right now. Before, it was like, if you went into the Village when I was going to school, it's late 70s, early 80s, it was like the 60s never ended. That's what it looked like. It looked like a bunch of hippies. You know, all the girls had that straight hair. You know, everyone wore jeans, corduroys. You know, it was so cold in the school, there was no heat. You would rub your hands on your corduroys, you know, the ribbon to heat up your hands. You'd have those, you know, first day of school, like the black corduroys. They were like really bright black, you know. And you wore flannel shirts, stuff like that. It was freezing in that school. And it was a very bad school. It really was. The teachers were very simple. But that's where I went, and then I went into the projects and met all the gangbangers. And just that, at that time, it was like the whites versus the blacks. And the media was doing this. The whites listened to heavy metal music, which was the devil's music. And the blacks listened to rap. When DMC came to Brockton, that was the big thing for the blacks. And the whites, you know, they liked, I don't know. I don't even know who the bands were. Poison or Bon Jovi and whatever. I was more retro. Whatever the case was, it was culture shock. I'm taking a long time to explain this, but it's worth explaining. It's worth explaining because either gonna, if I just say it in one sentence, you're not gonna be able to understand where Derek Carr might be coming from. I'm trying to relate my life to maybe what Derek Carr was seeing out of Lynch. Because when I went to school, I wasn't used to those type of people. It wasn't just black. There was white people living in the projects too. And they were people of low character. There were people who would steal. There were people who would cheat. And there were even NFL football players in my or football players to be in my junior high. I remember one in particular. Not gonna name his name. He brought a gun to school in the 8th grade. We would have been 14 years old. It was kind of shocking. At that point, I was already shell-shocked. I mean, I used to go home after junior high because I hated it and put the headphones on. Put the headphones on and listen to, like, the Beatles. I would listen to the Carpenters. I would listen to basically music from the 60s and 70s. And I didn't understand this culture shock. I don't care if it was the heavy metal. I don't care if it was the rap. I didn't like either one. And my brother was actually inviting urban types into the house. He invited a murderer into the house. When he was 13, he invited a man into the house, a black male, who had murdered before and got away with it. And other ones that were drug dealers. They spoke like Lynch. And it was shocking. It was shocking coming from, like, a family being compared to the Brady Bunch growing up. And then to be thrust into this urban society. Now, Lynch is the product of his environment. You take him as a baby and you put him in, like, London, England. And he's going to have better diction than me. He is a product of his environment. He's a product of being around people who cannot enunciate very well. And he speaks the way he does because he is urban, because that was his environment. There wasn't a lot of education. There was not a lot of encouragement for education or seeking out anything outside of this bubble, this urban bubble. And I've been around people even after that. I'm talking about going into my 20s and 30s who would carry on in the most outrageous, disgusting way and harass you, like on a job or something, because they were urban, extremely urban, and if you're not used to that, it is shocking. Derek Carr, I guarantee, is shocked by Marshawn Lynch. And some reports have come out that Marshawn Lynch undermines his authority. In other words, Derek Carr wants to stay in charge. This is our team, me and Khalil Mack. And Khalil Mack doesn't come across as urban as Lynch. Lynch is way urban. Because it's not so much color. I've seen plenty of white people in the word urban. And criminals, liars. Just, usually it's the dishonesty factor. They will lie like a rug. And Lynch might just speak up while he's trying to explain himself and undermine his authority. And the team just gets distracted. Well, he's very focused and Lynch is not. I mean, many times Lynch looked pretty bad trying to go out for passes. He'd run in the wrong direction or something like that. And I believe what Derek Carr is saying right here is he wants Lynch gone. And this might become a problem with Gruden. Because if Gruden can't sort Lynch out, if he can't see that maybe he is a locker room cancer, and that if you look at Gruden's offenses in the past, like with the Raiders, he liked a running back that could catch. I don't know if that's the actual style they will run, but Lynch is not too good as a pass catcher. Washington and Rashad, and they took step backs a lot because the offensive line didn't do too well, and they had a reduced role. And I think it affected especially Rashad, who's an excellent pass catcher. And those guys do not come across like Lynch. Because I want to make that very clear. This has nothing to do with black and white. Because I know a lot of you have a low mentality just like Lynch, and you will just see it as black and white. I do not see it from Rashad. I do not see it from Washington. I do not see it from Olawale, although you don't hear from Olawale. I mean, that's a guy that he would be sort of like, Gruden's, what's his name? Who's the fullback? Ritchie. John Ritchie. He would be John Ritchie. What happened to Olawale this year? I know there was some injuries maybe, but never heard from him again. But Marshawn Lynch is way urban. And I think Mikey Raider Central is right on with Derek Carr. Although, if he's Bible studying, maybe he just knows all these things. There are some people who can pick out verse. But I think he said before that he does search out verses, or he goes to a website that points out the verse of the day. It's possible that someone found this for him. Maybe he was talking to someone. People who are very religious like that, they seek out counsel. Yeah, I just remembered something. In one of the, I think it was one of the OTAs, after a holiday, I don't know what a holiday it was, but they came back to practice and not everyone was right. In other words, they didn't say it in the press, they were hungover. Lynch, especially. And Derek Carr doesn't drink. So, trust me, if you don't drink and you're around people who drink, well, whatever Lynch does, I mean, he might just swallow 1,000 Skittles and get high off of them. But whatever. I do believe this was carefully selected to send a loud message. And Derek Carr might have a lot to say here, right here, because Lynch is probably a distraction and probably a culture shock to him that, he might not be able to get over. He might be too thin-skinned. I mean, I'm talking about years later for me, from that original culture shock. I've got way thick skin right now, and I can take the culture shock. I could even interpret it if I have the Urban Dictionary handy. But Derek Carr is 26 years old. He's been in the league 4 years, and he's they made him 22 in college, and was he there 4 years? And before then, he was in high school for 4 years. And he's been insulated that whole time. They don't allow people like Lynch into the Christian high schools, I guarantee, and he wouldn't go to one. So he's been totally distant from those type of people, and he's not lived in bad neighborhoods. His brother made damn sure, who's 12 years his senior, I believe, his brother made damn sure his family was well taken care of. They lived in Texas. So a lot of places are very conservative. I guarantee they lived in a conservative neighborhood. And then they moved to California, but they didn't move to Oakland. They moved to, I don't know if they lived in Bakersfield or, I don't know where they lived, but I think he's insulated himself. I mean, he sometimes he talks like a millennial with some of that urban light sort of talk. I've seen that with Carr, whatever, but that's not the Marshawn Lynch, I would call it gangbanger urban. I mean, he doesn't even speak English. That's why he doesn't talk a lot in front of the mic. He doesn't speak English. He mumbles things. But I think it's culture shock. And I think Derek Carr wants Lynch gone. That's my opinion. And you can be offended by it, or you can open your eyes to it in a different perspective. There's a lot of people who can be offended by it. People like Lynch. And the other people will just be Raider fans who just see it. Oh, we're all Raider fans. We're all Raiders. Raiders for life. Blah, blah, blah. But the reality is, if you're not used to it, and this is thrown upon you, and it doesn't appear too many other people on the team are like this. Crabtree is he's a little urban, a little more urban than, Quiet Cooper, or some of the other. Yeah, Roberts is a little urban, but Lynch he's out there. He's out there like no one else. I mean, these other guys are not grabbing their crotch in the end zone and stuff. I mean, this guy is way out there. And we can only imagine what's going on in the locker room. I mean, there might be just outrageous things going on that are not being talked about. And, I guarantee he's one of those, what's that song? He walks in the classroom cool and slow. Charlie Brown, he's a clown. That's Lynch. He's the wise guy or whatever, and I guarantee he undermines the authority of the now rich quarterback. And that's a problem. Thanks, Mikey Raider, for pointing that out.